And welcome to the Fantasy Life Show, Week 17 Review Edition. We have made it to the finale, everyone. I hope you clinched those fantasy football championships. If you haven't yet, maybe it's not too late to do so. If, you are completely dead in the water. 364 more days to get ready for the next round. But regardless, I am your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great. It's a great day to, again, go through the top performers and some of the busts here from an ever-eventful Week 17. So, no Dwayne McFarland tonight. He was just so broken up about Matt Collins being sent to IR that just couldn't honestly get in front of a camera. That and like had a family trip or something like that. So we'll see Dwayne back here soon enough. In the meantime, we do have Fantasy Life's own Matt LaMarca in the house. Matt, you do so much good stuff, man, for us in the NFL side of things, particularly your incentive article, which is going to be very handy here in Week 18 as we get into more of the DFS streets, because Lord knows redraft season is finally over. But how's it going, man?
Yeah, no, it's good. Nobody is more upset about Matt Collins going down than Matt Collins, who was one of those players that had some incentives to look forward to over the final couple of weeks. And alas, he can't get there. But his loss was Stephon Diggs' gain, who I'm sure we will talk about in a little bit.
100%, man. So big day for Diggs, big day for Drake May, big day for plenty of guys. And accordingly, guys, we're not going to be doing our traditional kind of game-by-game review here because, again, fantasy season over, but did want to take the time to go position by position, go through some of the top performers, again, your fantasy championship game MVPs, if you will, some of the busts, what went right, what went wrong, and all that. So accordingly, LaMarca, let's kick things off with quarterback where, again, QB1, Drake May, 32.4 fantasy points, and basically 3/4 of action against the New York Jets, 256 passing yards, 5 scores through the air, chipped in another 22 rushing yards. Per next gen stats, he had a plus 25% completion percentage over expected guys' second highest mark of the season. And now the QB2 in the fantasy playoffs behind only Trevor Lawrence. So, Matt, when you look at Drake May, man, he had a consensus ADP this preseason as the QB16. He has a good case for, fantasy MVP as it is, but easily the late round QB of 2025.
Yeah, I mean, he might be the MVP, not even just the fantasy MVP. First quarterback in history to go 90+% completion percentage, 250+ yards, and 5+ touchdowns in a game, which, yeah, it's not all that surprising that no one else has ever hit those three benchmarks in the same game. But, this is why there was some concern about, is the game script going to be bad for May, right? Are they too big of a favorite versus the Jets? Yeah, it turns out you can't win games unless you put up, a lot of points in the process. You can't win blowouts, at least. So all worked out for Drake May. It was a tremendous season. And yeah, I think I saw he was still around plus 200 to take home the MVP after today's performance. I think that's a pretty good price.
It's about the same, man. Personally, I do not have a vote, but I would give it to him. You're on the same page there?
I really want to give it to Stafford, but that may just be because I love Matt Stafford and I am a Patriots hater. It's hard to argue against what Drake May has done. I mean, he doesn't have a lot to work with there, and he is making the most out of everything he's got.
And he's largely, for most of us out there, made the Patriots likable again for the first time in two plus decades. So again, great stuff from May, and obviously the cherry on top of what was a fantastic season. QB2 on the week, though, guys. Packers quarterback Malik Willis, 31.5 big ones there on Saturday night against the Baltimore Ravens. Man, 288 yards and a touchdown, 18 of 21 passing. Of course, those legs that really brought home those fantasy points, 60 rushing yards and 2 scores on the ground. The thing is, though, LaMarca, the Packers now have punted 1 time in their last 3 games combined, and they're somehow still 0-3. So fantastic stuff from Malik Willis. Hopefully Green Bay can figure things out here because certainly got some big games ahead of them. But I did want to get your perspective on this because Malik Willis is one of these guys where in a fairly weak, from what I can, just gather right now, kind of NFL draft coming up for the quarterbacks, there's not a ton of big names on free agency. Like Malik Willis, I don't think he's going to get 200 million or anything like that, but we could certainly see a world where he's getting 20+ million. Justin Fields just did last year, for crying out loud. So when I list some teams like, the Dolphins, Jets, Browns, Cardinals, Steelers, Raiders, Vikings. I'll even throw the Panthers in there. We'll get to Bryce Young's day here in a little bit. The Falcons, is there a 2025 or 2026, I should say, destination, LaMarca, that really rings out to you for Malik Willis?
I would love to see the Vikings personally. I think Willis, all we've seen from him since joining the Packers is the dude is a player. Whether or not, that's just him taking advantage of a good system with a good offensive head coach in Matt LaFleur. Well, I can think of other systems and other good offensive head coaches that have had a lot of success with quarterbacks and with reclamation projects, right? Kevin O'Connell, maybe he doesn't get full credit for the Sam Darnold renaissance, but I would love to see him get his hands on somebody like Malik Willis and even at a minimum, just help push JJ McCarthy a little bit.
Yep. I had the Vikings down as one of my top 3. Also, the Dolphins. I had the Jets, though, with the caveat being a good offensive mind. Okay, Aaron.
No reclamation project should be allowed near the Jets. It's just not going to work. It's just not going to work if that's the case.
You're probably right. But man, Garrett Wilson, A.D. Mitchell, the offensive line actually hasn't been horrible. So, but no, I hear you. If we are looking out for Malik Willis, we probably should just go with the Dolphins or Vikings. I am with you there. Going to run through these next handful of guys. But QB3, Giants quarterback Jackson Dart, 25.3 fantasy points. Had another 2 rushing touchdowns. Now has 9 on the season. Tied with Christian McCaffrey. Only Josh Allen actually has more fantasy points among QBs when it comes to rushing. So also is getting out of bounds a little bit more. Hopefully doing a better job of taking care of that body as we get into his future. QB number 4, though, is going to be Josh Allen. Had 23.2 fantasy points in that thriller against the Eagles. Unfortunately, couldn't find Khalil Shakur for what would have been the game-winning 2-point conversion, but 2 more push touchdowns on his own right. You know, I loved using that meme, you know, it's the Professor Snape, you know, Potter, how dare you use my spells against me? That's what it seemed like with the Bills using it against the Eagles. My angry little wiener dogs love that one as well. QB5 on the week, Trevor Lawrence, guys, 23.1 fantasy points against the Colts, 263 yards through the air. But yet another quarterback with 2 rushing touchdowns in the same game, LaMarca. Crazy. He also has 9 rushing touchdowns on the season. So QB1 in the fantasy playoffs. And just in terms of like quarterbacks who I would say real life kind of mindset and how we view them, like weeks 1 through 8, 9 through compared to 9-17, like has anyone had a better just kind of change, I guess, in how we now view them than Trevor Lawrence?
I'm hoping it's legit. You know, I want to believe that Trevor Lawrence has finally become the prince who was promised. You know, shout out Daenerys Targaryen. Like, this is what was always expected of him, right? And he's starting to look like that guy. He's bringing Parker Washington along for the ride with him. Like, Jacksonville, could they win the AFC? I think it's possible. You know, like nobody in the AFC should really scare Jacksonville at this point. I think Houston, Jacksonville, like anybody that gets in really is gonna feel like they have a chance to win this thing. And Lawrence is playing clearly the best football of his career.
We got some feisty defenses with a lot of offenses that have at least one flaw or another. But again, over the last month or two, man, T-Law really has done a lot to cover those up. So still turning into a bit of a frog whenever he's targeting Brian Thomas Jr. and missing him for a potential touchdown there down the stretch. But you mentioned Parker Washington, Jacoby Myers really getting a lot out of T-Law here recently. And then finally, QB6, Dak Prescott had 22.7 fantasy points against the Commanders back on Christmas, 307 yards and a pair of touchdowns. A very long one on a deep post to Turpin. Now is an NFL high 4,482 passing yards, will become the first quarterback in Cowboys history to lead the NFL in passing. So that would be fun there. Just some other notes, guys. Good game from Tyler Shuck, 21.9 fantasy points. Joe Burrow had 20.4. Very fun game from Cam Ward and also Tyler Shuck. We'll talk more about them a little bit later. Jalen Hurts, only 8.9 fantasy points. Really has been a dud down the stretch, primarily because he hasn't scored a tush-push touchdown in weeks. Really will be interesting to see how his ADP falls next year if we do, in fact, see that play made illegal. But also, Matt, couldn't go without talking about just a complete disaster of a quarterback, battle, if you will, between Bryce Young and Sam Darnold. So Bryce Young averaged 2.3 yards per attempt, guys, 54 passing yards on 24 pass attempts. That is the fewest yards by a quarterback with 24 pass attempts since David Woodley for the Dolphins back in 1980, man. Like, come on, Bryce. And he's had really good games before, but God, the passing chart, man, is a disaster. He did not complete a pass thrown, I think, over like 6 or 7 yards, which is unfortunate, LaMarca, because the one thing when you do watch the Panthers, like that Bryce does really well, when he's not, he's not doing his good magician stuff, making plays off script and all that, it's throwing that deep ball down the sideline to Tedrow McMillan or Jalen Coker. And just to not even see them try today, man, hats off the Seahawks defense. We know they're good, but very, very disappointing for him for Bryce when he's been playing good football, more weeks than not recently.
It's tough with him because for every good game he puts together, it seems like he has 3 bad ones. So, huge game next week. I know that the schedule makers are probably happy to see Carolina lose this one because it means that we've got Panthers Bucks next week for all the marbles, and it's really a battle of who wants it less. It feels like, right? Because as bad as Bryce Young looked today, Baker Mayfield's been playing that poor for going on 6-7 weeks at this point.
It's true, man. Really has been rough for Baker. Now leads the NFL in interceptions since entering the league, which is a little bit of a volume stat, but still not a
Yeah.
great one to be at top of. And then finally, guys, Jared Goff, 2.1 fantasy points. Sheesh, that was rough. So that's the worst he's easily performed against Brian Flores and the Vikings. He's actually been in a little bit, not honestly pretty good against them over the last 2 or 3 years, but just wasn't meant to be out there. And we really have seen this Lions offense completely become a shell of themselves without the benefit of an elite offensive line. Let's move on to some running backs. And let's face it, LaMarca, the early and probably, let's face it, MVP from Fantasy Championship weekend is our one true king, Derrick Henry, 45.6 fantasy points against the Packers. Not one, not two, not three, but 4 touchdowns, 216 yards along the way. Now up to the RB7 on the season on a per game basis. Matt, next year, 2026, old man Derrick Henry, are you still going to draft him?
Hell yeah. I think he's still a borderline top 10 running back. I did find it interesting that John Harbaugh was kind of getting killed for taking Henry off the field down the stretch 2 weeks ago in that collapse. And so he just decided, you know what? Let's ride this guy. 36 carries or something like that. And it makes you wonder, even if they do get Lamar Jackson back next week, is that just their best chance to pick up a victory at this point? Is just try and ride the big dog for as many carries as he can possibly give you? Because it was effective against the Packers. I know the Packers didn't have Micah Parsons, and he's been, their best defender all season. We'll see if they can be as successful on the ground versus Pittsburgh. But man, if you're Baltimore, you got to feel a lot more comfortable with whoever is under center, just turning around and handing that thing off at this point than actually putting it in the air.
I think he had 21 rush attempts in the first half
Yeah.
alone. So, no, I hear you, man. I mean, as much as Zay Flowers has come on a little bit here over the last few weeks, the tight ends have completely disappeared. Rashad Bateman feels like he's been playing through some pain. DeAndre Hopkins is at that point in his career where he either makes a spectacular catch or he's just complaining about not getting a flag because he basically can't get separation when he's out there. Obviously, a fantastic career, though, for the artist known as Nuke. Moving on to our RB2, Bengals RB Chase Brown, another big one there, certainly carrying guys to plenty of championships, 29.1 PPR points against the Arizona Cardinals. He keeps on doing this in the second half of the season, LaMarca. When you look at weeks 1 through 8, last year, he was the RB30. This year, he was the RB25. Weeks 9 through 17, though, last year, RB3. And this year, with 21 PPR points per game, the RB4. So great stuff. Sure, last year had Zach Moscow out and then also Samaje Perine this year for at least a little bit. But also just getting Joe Burrow back has helped, man. And just the Bengals offensive line, as big of a disaster as has generally been over the course of, the last half decade plus or so. I do think they've done a better job than maybe given credit for, at least, in the second half of the season. So a lot of factors going Chase Brown's way. But man, if we do enter next season without much added competition to Chase Brown, which I don't know why they really would go out of their way to do so, we've seen the dude now give us 2 second half seasons. That's a top 5 RB, man. Going to be very interesting if we get another chance to draft him at, more of an RB12 ADP.
No, and I shout out to Chase Brown for making me look smart on the Child podcast this week. I called him out as my, streamer of the week, which feels weird to say about a guy who's a top 10 option in all formats, basically. But in the guillotine finals, you can get real selective. And Brown, I thought, was being mispriced outside of the top 5 at the position. I liked him this week, and he came through for me. Like you said, it kind of made sense that he took off down the stretch last year with all the work that he got without Zach Moss. Not sure entirely what is to blame for the split this season, but boy, if Trevor Lawrence isn't the playoff MVP for fantasy purposes, it's probably Chase Brown at this point.
Again, obviously went nuclear there in week 16, especially, but honestly, been putting more games in bad than not second half of the year. So shout out to Chase Brown. RB3 in a very fantasy football fashion, guys, was Patriots RB. Ramondre Stevenson, of course, because we were all planning on playing him, and then Travion Henderson was active. And then we said, well, probably move Ramondre down. And then it didn't matter because he converted 12 touches into 102 yards and a pair of scores. So again, Travion, 19 touches for just 82 yards and no touchdowns. Sometimes that is just the way the cookie crumbles. RB4, we had Seahawks running back Zach Charbonnet with 26.2 fantasy points against the Panthers, had 2 more short touchdowns. And on the season now, guys, has 11 rushing touchdowns. The length from longest to shortest, 17, 6, 5, 5, 4.22.1111. So again, Charbonnet has been doing better than he was earlier in the year. The yards
Some
per carry,
Jerome Bettis work right
advanced
there.
stats were rough, but oh my God, dude, what was it? 5 carries, 1 yard, and like 3 scores for the bus back in the day. But yeah, man, hey, someone's got to score those touchdowns. Give Sharpton credit. He has been good there. LaMarca, I want to get your thoughts though on our RB5. Commanders RB, Bill Krosky Merritt with 22.5 fantasy points against the Cowboys. Now the RB13 in the fantasy playoffs when I last checked. That said, it came because Chris Rodriguez was a late Christmas morning scratch with an illness, man. That's rough. I know my best friend literally didn't get to it because, he set his lineup at 11 a.m. and thought he could open up gifts with his family. What an idiot, man.
Grind doesn't stop, brother. Grind don't stop. You think they care? It's Christmas. No. It really just felt fitting for Bill's season, right? Like he has been so boom or bust. Anytime it felt like you could trust him, he disappointed. So it only felt right that he went off for 22 and a half fantasy points while sitting on most people's bench this week. It'll be interesting to see what the Commanders do with the backfield next year. I'm not sure who's going to be back if they look to add to the position in free agency. I'd be pretty surprised if we went into next year with Bill slated for like a much larger role than he had this year. He's been pretty ineffective, all things considered.
Again, fun stretch run, fun start to the season, but those 8 or 9 weeks in there during the middle, I should say, were pretty rough and certainly didn't give us any confidence there down the stretch. So don't beat yourselves up, guys, if you weren't able to quite make that switch. RB6, Jets RB Breece Hall with 20.9 fantasy points against the Patriots, basically thanks to a 59-yard rushing touchdown, down 42-3. Cue up that Chris Paul. It's a huge 3 to cut the lead, the 40 meme right there. RB7, Chargers RB Omari and Hampton with 20 fantasy points against Houston. He did have an elite every down, 83% snap rate with no Kamani Vidal. Again, would expect that to persist here as long as the Chargers don't have a second running back they can trust. Broncos RB RJ Harvey, RB8 with 18.6 fantasy points against KC. Had the game-winning touchdown catch there late, weeks 11 through 17 with no J.K. Dobbins. Has 17.1 PPR points per game. Good for RB10 status. Going to be very interesting, LaMarca, how this goes next year. Because remember, Harvey could not find the field with J.K. Dobbins active because J.K. Dobbins was playing really freaking good. So obviously rookies come on, and Harvey did some good things down the stretch, but I just already know when we start getting into some of this early ADP, even if we have a backfield that's once again J.K. Dobbins and RJ Harvey, everyone's going to want to draft RJ Harvey over him, and I'm probably going to be the one sitting back and taking J.K. Dobbins at a 50-pick discount.
Yeah, why not? I mean, that there's always a bit of a sticker increase for the young guys, right? I mean, we saw it with the Dallas backfield this season. I mean, how many drafts did you do where Jaden Blue, who we didn't even get on the field for most of the year, was being drafted right in the same vicinity as Javonte Williams. And it wouldn't be a huge shock if he did it again. I think Omari and Hampton is the guy that it really feels like wheels up for next year. He is the guy that, I think borderline top 5 option at the position. Certainly, I think a top 10 type of guy. Like, it was good to see him sort of get back on track. He's a good player and a good offense. And I think he's going to be poised for a pretty big sophomore season.
Has shown big-time receiving ability, too, and really has been forced to work without those 2 badass freaking tackles throughout most of this year. Wheels up for that Chargers offense, if for the love of the injury, guys, they can just stay healthy for once. RB9, Jonathan Taylor, good to see him have a relative bounce back, 17.4 PPR points, but man, was the RB1 in weeks 1 through 10 with 27.4 PPR points, just the RB16 at 13.8 since week 12. Devin Singletary snuck in there as the RB10 with 17 PPR points against the Raiders. Saints running back Audric Estime with 16.8 PPR points against the Titans, had a 32-yard touchdown. Late to ice it, ended up taking over from Taysom Hill. We'll talk more about that tilting experience here in a little bit, guys. And then Aaron Jones closing things out as the RB12 did have a 63% snap rate with Jordan Mason sideline. Otherwise, Devon Achane, 14.2 PPR points, leads all running backs in PPR points from receiving these last 2 seasons. Tony Pollard, 11.5 PPR points, 95 more total yards to the total on the season. And now LaMarca, only 2 running backs over the last 4 years have gained at least 1,000 rushing yards in each and every year. Derrick Henry and Tony Pollard, of course.
What a list! What a list! Put them right next to each other in Canton. Pollard. It's nice to see this Titans offense, right, show some signs of life. I think we both kind of agree. Cam Ward looks like a baller. He's just had absolutely no help. I mean, the worst supporting cast. So it's nice to see Pollard, staying relevant down the stretch, and hopefully that springboards this offense into better things next year.
Again, was a situation where he was looking really horrible, guys, the first 14 weeks of the first 13 weeks of the season. But that's just the thing, man. As much as we want to say, like, oh, yeah, why would you ever draft, the Genti or the Tony Pollard in these bad offenses? Like, volume doesn't always win. It does sometimes, okay? It's not perfect. I'm not saying either was like a slam dunk pick or anything. We have many weeks that tell us they weren't, but it is funny when these things do eventually work out. Unfortunately, dud for James Cook, just 8.7 PPR points. The Bills love them some Ty Johnson. They will not apologize for it. Also, just 8.3 more PPR points from Bucky Irving, just 11.1 per game since returning from injury, RB26. I mean, LaMarca, he's averaging a league low 3.4 yards per carry among 48 backs. And I know yards per carry isn't the end all be all. I've watched Bucky Irving. I don't think he's the worst rusher of the football in the NFL, but man, at some point we got to be like, what the hell, man?
Yeah, no, he doesn't look like the same player that we saw last year. I mean, I could not have been banging the drum harder for Bucky Irving last season. I've gone as far as to go on record and call Rachaad White a Ponzi scheme. I don't think he's a real NFL running back. He just kind of catches passes and stuff, which is fine. Like, you can do that, but Bucky Irving was just so much better at running the football last season. And that gap just really has not existed this year, particularly since Irving came back from his injury. I think he's clearly at less than 100%. And it's just another reason why this Bucs offense has really struggled down the stretch.
So again, would love to see a healthy Bucky, later next year. I know a lot of his games haven't had Tristan Wirfs particularly going on, so not all on him, but just it's tough when I see him averaging 3.4 and then in the same backfield, in the same offense, Sean Tucker's at 4 and Rachaad White, even the Ponzi scheme himself at 4.4. So just 6.8 points from Saquon Barkley, got a little bit banged up out there. 6.4 from Jahmyr Gibbs, certainly not good for anyone that was lucky enough to squeak through into the finals with him. And then only 1.3 from Josh Jacobs, 3 yards on 5 touches. Chris Brooks and Emmanuel Wilson played more snaps. Just really unfortunate, Matt, because again, as the season was going on, like Josh Jacobs seemed like every single week was making at least one ridiculous play. But it just goes to show us, man, we never quite know just how injured these dudes are.
Yep. And no, they took him off the injury report, right? Heading into this game. It felt like it was wheels up. There was the weird situation last week where he kind of got soft benched, it looked like, but it wasn't because he was hurt, and it wasn't because he was being punished for being for fumbling, at least according to Matt LaFleur. But then he comes right back out and follows that up with a 3-carry performance. So you have to believe something is going on there. Hopefully he can get a week off next week. I mean, he basically got a week off this week, but Packers, nothing to play for really at this point. So just rest him up and get ready for a first round playoff matchup. They, I think, are going to be locked into the number 7 seed at this point. So just get ready to go on the road somewhere and hope that he's ready to answer the call.
Him and Baker just seem like prime candidates for that, week after their team's eliminated overall. Like, oh, yeah, by the way, they were playing with this for the last 2 months. Right. Now they're undergoing some surgery they probably should have gotten months ago.
Speaking of, did you see that Max Crosby had surgery? I love how hard he was fighting to stay on the field when the dude legitimately needed to get surgery. I mean, talk about a football player. How can you not love Max Crosby?
That was fantastic, because when you got the report that he stormed out, it was like, oh, man, they really are doing this for no reason. It's like, no, he actively did need surgery. It's just Max being Max. What an absolute beast out there. One of the best players in the NFL, man, regardless of position. Let's talk some wide receivers. And the wide receiver one of the week, probably helped win you guys a lot of championships, was Saints wide receiver Chris Olave, 25.9 big ones against the Titans, caught 8 of 11 targets for 119 yards and a touchdown. Again, going to really break down that Saints and Titans game here at the end of the show, but great stuff from Olave. Bengals wide receiver Jamar Chase, 25 fantasy points against the Cardinals, finally scored the touchdown. Enjoyed being back in the end zone so much he did it twice. 19.3 PPR points per game on the season, LaMarca. That's good for wide receiver 3 status. And it's just kind of wild because Joe Burrow knocked out for over half the season. It felt like Jamar Chase wasn't really his usual self, and it's like, oh yeah, still the 3rd best scoring wide receiver in fantasy. That's not a bad floor.
The best thing that happened to him was the Joe Flacco trade, right? I mean, that kept him really relevant while Burrow was out, because it was rough for a stretch there with Jake Browning under center. But no, it was nice to see this Bengals offense the last 2 weeks really answer all the questions. I know that Joe Burrow still, it seems like there are some stuff that they might have to address this offseason, but any sort of concerns you had about this offense being just too broken with too bad of an offensive line. They showed that they can at least still put up some points. So Jamar Chase, Chase Brown, and Burrow himself, like these guys came through for us when we needed them in the championship.
And that was a good thing from Burrow, too. Not that I ever doubted he wasn't still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, but if you did look at his 6 healthy games this year, he just wasn't really putting forward the numbers that we're used to seeing, was certainly able to do so during these last 2 weeks. So hopefully some of you guys are able to ride that wave. Wide receiver 3 on the week. Buccaneers wide receiver Chris Godwin with 23.8 PPR points against the Dolphins, caught 7 of 8 targets for 108 yards in the score. Actually looked pretty nimble and showed some speed on there on that 59-yard catch and run. So hopefully can get back to looking a little bit more like himself in 2026 and beyond, but certainly going to be a crowded situation in Tampa Bay with Jalen McMillan, Mike Evans, and of course, and Emeka Egbuka there as well. We had a tie for our wide receiver 4, Wan'Dale Robinson and Christian Watson. Each got 22.3 points. I want to give Wan'Dale some love first, though, because he's now the wide receiver 17 on the season. It's even better if you take away the first month where, he was obviously sharing a lot of those targets with Malik Neighbors. So over 1,000 receiving yards. And LaMarca, I went back last year and I was making fun of it. And I think I was right, man. Go, if you guys want to just waste 45 minutes of your life, go back and watch every single catch Wan'Dale had in 2024. And you're going to see a lot of plays that look like they're designed to gain 3 yards. But the problem was it's like 3rd and 10 out there. So not necessarily on Wan'Dale. And look, that doesn't mean I wasn't completely wrong for not drafting this dude way more often as non-existent ADP. But I think the lesson here at LaMarca, looking at Wan'Dale Robinson, is just like, hey, if this guy earned 140 freaking targets and he's priced outside the top 60 wide receivers in fantasy, let's draft him. Why not?
Yep. You can't teach height in the NBA. You can't teach volume for fantasy, right? And it's like roles change. Obviously, when Neighbors went down, the offense looked drastically different. Jackson Dart taking over a quarterback drastically changed things. How fun was the Wan'Dale performance when Jameis Winston, got to play a couple times for the Giants? So, I think it's an interesting scenario that we can potentially learn from, especially when it's like there's one alpha stud receiver like Malik Neighbors. If he stayed healthy this season, probably leads the league in targets, or certainly leads it in target share. It might be interesting to ask ourselves next year, what happens if that guy goes down? An offense that comes to mind is the Seahawks. Jackson Smith and Jigba, so good this year, so dominant. But what does that offense look next year if, God forbid, something happens to him? I imagine basically everybody else that catches passes in that offense is going to be free in drafts. And unfortunately, injuries are a part of the game. So it might be some interesting contingency plans to look at in Seattle.
And it's a good point because we obviously pay a ton of attention to that running back. But as we've seen these past 2 seasons, especially, it's not like running backs are just guaranteed to get injured more often than the wide receivers. So ideally, no one will ever get injured. But as we all know, that is simply not the case. So again, one of my goals for the next offseason, just being a little more diligent and trying to take 5 to 10 minutes, hopefully more, but just going through every single player and being like, why is Wan'Dale Robinson the wide receiver at 64? And can we just take, a couple minutes to hopefully try to figure something out and then draft a freaking wide receiver 17 at that low price. Again, mentioned Christian Watson with the big game against the Ravens, the wide receiver 20 now on the season. Shout out to him too. Again, I think a lot of people, including myself, just figured this would be a lost season. We even had Mr. Watson, Papa Watson, telling us that he wasn't going to be back for a while. Great stuff there from Christian. Someone you mentioned at the top of the show, LaMarca, Patriots wide receiver Stephon Diggs caught all 6 of his targets for 101 yards and a touchdown. Now the wide receiver 22 on the season, still hasn't finished worse than the wide receiver 25 since Barack Obama was in office. So Stephon Diggs and LaMarca, someone who we've just been begging to get this full-time route rate, and because there is no Matt Collins and because there is no Kayshon Boutte, Patriots didn't have another choice, and the man balled out.
Yeah, and it's not like he was a clear volume hog. He only had 6 targets, but he's been pretty efficient all year. I mean, that's what happens when you play with the quarterback who leads the league in completion percentages, right? Like, you don't need as many targets as you do for maybe a different offense. So yeah, it was nice to see Stephon Diggs as he inches closer to some more of these incentives. And he's got some big incentives in his contract. I want to say they're like $500,000 a piece down the stretch. So he's going to have a chance to earn some money depending on whether or not he actually plays in week 18.
I think he might have caught a score today that got him like 500 big ones. Must be one heck of a feeling to get
Yeah.
that. So, last thing with Diggs, guys, ESPN has some advanced receiver ratings. Look, they're not perfect. What stat is perfect? Okay, it's a team sport, 11 on 11, where just car crashes happen every play. But they do have open rating, which is meant to help quantify separation. They do it every single route. It's not just on a per target basis. The only 6 wide receivers with an open rating north of 80 this year: Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Stephon Diggs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, and Chris Olave. So, pretty good company for a guy who, again,
Pretty
I
good
think
list.
considered, was going to be past his prime. So even if you want to say he's not as good as those guys, okay, move him down a little bit. And guess what? We're still pretty far up on that list. Wide receiver 7, though, in week 17, Cardinals wide receiver Michael Wilson with 19.9 PPR points against the Bengals. Probably got a little lucky. Was kind of going down the sideline. Looked like some of the Bengals thought he had already stepped out of bounds, but he did not. And he went ahead and found his way into the end zone. Since that initial week 11 boom, 21.2 fantasy points per game. That's good for the second most at the position behind only Puka Nacua. So only 19 snaps for Marvin Harrison Jr. in this one. It seemed like he hurt the heel again. What does Jonathan Gannon exactly do in Arizona, LaMarca? Because I don't really know.
I have no idea what this offense is going to look like next year. I mean, I'm just going to be drafting Trey McBride. I was a big McBride guy coming into this year. I felt like he was being undervalued a little bit, and we'll talk about him later. But at the receiver position, I have no idea what to make of this situation for next year. Is Michael Wilson better than Marvin Harrison Jr.? Maybe. I mean, we had no evidence of that for like 2.5 years, basically, but certainly the way he's played down the stretch is better than anything that Marvin Harrison has done. So is he the team's wide receiver 1 next year? Does the draft capital make it Marvin Harrison Jr. still the favorite? Ultimately, this is probably just going to be a situation to stay away from, especially since they might have a new quarterback. Like the only thing I feel confident with the Cardinals is that Kyler Murray won't be their quarterback next year.
Yeah. Again, when we have this uncertainty, we'll see a lot of situations that we can actually buy into. The Cowboys backfield, we didn't know what was going to happen this year. Therefore, every single person was really cheap. So if that uncertainty makes Michael Wilson and Marv these like low-end wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 types, okay. But yeah, I'm not ready to pay a premium for Marv as this, top 4 round pick anymore. And I imagine not many in the public will be either. Jaguars wide receiver Parker Washington, wide receiver 8 on the week. Another big one, guys. 115 more yards just 1 week after having 145 and a touchdown. North of 2 yards per route run this season. That's the highest on the team. And just, man, LaMarca, trying to figure out what the heck this wide receiver room is going to look like next year is going to be tough. We know Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be their X, and it's probably not going to have as many targets as we want there. Jacoby Myers just got paid. And then it's like, is Travis Hunter really going to walk in and completely displace Parker Washington, who has kind of looked like their best wide receiver portion of the season? I don't know, man. I mean, it's a great problem for Trevor Lawrence, Liam Cohen, and Jaguars fans to have, but a nightmare for us fantasy managers.
Yeah, no, it's an ugly situation because I agree. I think Parker Washington is good. I think he can play, and you would love to see him carve out a role next year where he can get 6-7 targets a game. But 6-7. I didn't do that on purpose, I swear. But yeah, you would have to imagine with what they invested in Travis Hunter, trading, not just taking him at number 2, but they traded up to do so. It's going to be him. He's going to get back on the field. Maybe they shift his focus to where he's more of a full-time defender and part-time offensive player, but I just have a hard time seeing that actually come to fruition.
Feels like it would make more sense just given that you now got the bodies of wide receiver and you really don't have the same sort of, talent at corner. And just, I don't know, not that he was playing bad at cornerback while trying to focus mostly on offense, but I always just thought, again, it'd make a little more sense to have him in a borderline gadget role. But obviously you picked him number 2. You maybe thought he could do much more than that on offense, and I'm sure he can. So just hopefully get healthy, Travis Hunter, and then we can go from there. Wide receiver 9 on the week, another Buccaneer, Jalen McMillan with 18.4 fantasy points against the Dolphins, caught 7 of 9 targets for 114 yards. Emeka Ibuka, guys, after we heard from Josh Grisler that they wanted to get him more involved early in the game, 0 targets in the first half. And it was another game where McMillan straight up played ahead of Emeka Ibuka. So this is wild, man, because we've seen 2 straight games or 3 straight games now where it's Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and now Jalen McMillan working ahead of Emeka Ibuka. I bet that ADP is going to be completely flipped, though, once we get into next season. So just the tale of 2 freaking, not even 2 halves, like 5 games versus the rest of the year for Emeka Ibuka. I heard, I think Sigmund Bloom, one of the best in our industry, obviously, he likened it to DeAndre Hopkins' rookie season where he was going kind of wild early on and then tethered off. So as long this has never happened before. And again, just betting on the first round talent who obviously had, a good first portion of the year, getting better in year 2 and beyond. Hopefully Baker Mayfield plays a little bit better. Like, I see the pass with Emeka Egbuka, but man, if this dude's going to have this top 15 or top 20 ADP at the position, man, that's going to be a scary click.
Yeah, and you got to feel good for Jalen McMillan, right? Who
Yeah.
was kind of being a breakout star down the stretch last year, and then suffered a really scary injury in the preseason. Took him a long time to get back on the field, and he put together a really nice game today. So I'm not sure what the rotation looks like in Tampa Bay next year. You would think that again, if Egbuka will earn more opportunities, and he was so good in the first half of the season, he deserves opportunities. And Mike Evans is still Mike Evans, but I don't think Jalen McMillan's going away. I think he's a real player. Maybe the most logical guy to go is Chris Godwin, but then again, they just paid him, right? So it's going to be a lot of mouths to feed, and it could be a situation where it's just a lot of volatile performances with different guys popping off on a week to week basis.
Remember McMillan, 8 touchdowns in just 13 games as a rookie. Certainly knows a thing or two about racking up fantasy points. Wide receiver 10 was Jaden Higgins, caught a long 75-yard touchdown early. CJ Stroud also had a nice one to Jalen Noel. Funny what he can do against Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter defenses when they don't know every freaking play. I'm just kidding. I'm a bitter Buckeye fan. I think you guys won in 2023 at least, and 2024, obviously fair and square. But regardless, Seahawks wide receiver Jackson Smith-Njigba, the wide receiver 11. It is funny, LaMarca, how JSN, has 9 catches, 72 yards, and you're like, only 16.2 fantasy points. Game. Like he's reached that Puka Nacua stage where like we are disappointed by this.
Yeah. I think the way that he's done it though has just been so impressive. I mean, the percentage of receiving yards that he has for the Seahawks this season, it's got to be close to a record level. I mean, I don't know that. Obviously, I'm just kind of making that up off the top of my head, but most top receivers for fantasy purposes, they're in elite passing offenses. The Seahawks are far from elite. I mean, in terms of pass rate over expectation, I think they're like number 30 in the league. But it doesn't matter because every time they throw the ball, it seems to go to JSN, and he seems to come down and make a huge play with the ball. So he's a stud. He is an absolute baller. And I think that he is in the conversation for top pick and top receiver in fantasy next year, maybe even the top overall player in fantasy. I would probably have Puka ahead of him, but it's going to be close. I mean, he is a really, really talented player. And if he can put up the numbers that he has in sort of a suboptimal situation, I would love to see what would happen if you really, truly unleashed him in a big time passing offense.
And if Stafford ends up retiring or going elsewhere, man, like we kind of heard rumors over the last few off seasons, I mean, that could be enough of a change to compel people to go ahead and go with JSN. So I will applaud him too. Like he had the one dud against the Vikings, but otherwise he's kept on keeping on at this incredible level, even with Sam Darnold turning back into a bit of a pumpkin, man. Weeks 1 through 10, before that horrific 4 interception game against the Rams, Darnold was second in the NFL in EPA per dropback. Since week 11, though, guys, 26th among 35 qualified quarterbacks. So he's faced some tougher defenses. I know it's a fairly arbitrary, layout there with, starting it right after his worst game of the season. But, it is something where I saw Ben Solak. He writes a great article on ESPN. It's live every Tuesday morning, I believe, just kind of breaking down the previous weeks. And he was bringing up kind of Darnold's kind of just like tight window, actual like completion percentage. And it fell off a freaking cliff after that Rams game. Ben obviously does a great job looking at film. And he was pointing out that he did think he was just, a tick more hesitant after throwing those 4 picks. Sometimes that can be, again, all you need here. So you trust the Seahawks team in, January, LaMarca, because they've had some huge wins and everything, but it's just, we've seen a lot of games now where Darnold is not looking like the guy that maybe we thought he was turning into.
Yeah, I mean, you can't give Sam Darnold any credit for that win against the Rams, unfortunately. I mean, it was a huge Rashid Shaheed touchdown, a miracle 2-point conversion that they ruled a backwards pass that apparently the guy is allowed to advance the ball. You can't do it in a regular play, but on a 2-pointer, no problem. And then a missed field goal from the Rams sort of near the end of regulation. So it's hard to give Sam Darnold any credit for that. I still think the Seahawks are one of the most talented teams in the league, one of the best teams on paper. And it's really going to be how far can Sam Darnold push himself in this playoff run. He's got, I think, more at stake than any other quarterback going into the playoffs. Maybe Josh Allen would feel the same way. The path has never been easier for him in the AFC, but I just don't think the Bills are very good. We know that Josh Allen is Superman. He's got very little to work with. If they don't make it to the Super Bowl, I'm not going to say like, oh, this was his last chance. This was his best chance. This might be Sam Darnold's best and final chance to prove that he belongs as a top flight quarterback in this league.
Especially when, let's face it, a lot of his bad games, he goes down taking a lot of sacks, turn the ball over a lot, and they aren't always, the sort of, ones that you can easily write off to the defense. So we'll see what happens. Again, still far more good than bad from Darnold over these last 2 years, but it's just not quite enough good, I would say, to be completely, convinced those ghosts are gone for good. And finally, Cowboys wide receiver Kevontae Turpin takes a 12 spot again, thanks to that fun 75-yard touchdown, 85 yards actually on a deep post. Very, very fun wide receiver, running back, returner gadget, if you will.
That's a showdown legend right there. You got to always have some exposure in the single game to Kevontae Turpin.
Get the wide receiver DST double stack going, and hopefully you get that return touchdown. Love that from Turpin. Unfortunately, with Turpin's big day, didn't see one from CeeDee Lamb, just 9.6 PPR points. Similar sentiment for Nico Collins with his Iowa State rookies hogging all the deep balls, only 8.7 points. 5.7 from Jameson Williams, 4.5 for Devontae Smith, 5 for Emeka Ibuka, 4.1 for Ladd McConkey, LaMarca. 7 straight game with under 50 receiving yards. We had this massively just horrible start to the season, and then we had 5 or 6 weeks of McConkey looking like the baller he was in 2024. And it's almost like he was so great during that stretch that we almost just like didn't fully understand that, oh no, he's crashing back to the guy we saw earlier in the season again. So I do think, again, that offensive line just cratering and not giving Herbert much of a chance probably is the most likely outcome here. But McConkey's another guy, man, where this year he was being drafted obviously as a borderline wide receiver 1. I think there's going to be a pretty big discount afforded here ahead of 2026. I'll be curious to see what kind of competition he has in the passing game. Keenan's back. Obviously, QJ is going to be there. Maybe Trey Harris takes a bigger step up and everything. But that Chargers, like if they draft another, day 1 or day 2 wide receiver, man, we'll see. But I'm not completely convinced at this point in time that McConkey is going to be this perennial wide receiver 1.
I mean, he wasn't really expected to be coming into the league, right? I mean, he had a great rookie year, but that was a very much like situation based. He was the only guy in town for the most part. And they added Keenan Allen. They added Quentin Johnston finally became a real NFL player. Like we maybe should have taken a stronger second look at McConkey, especially once they brought in Keenan, that it wasn't going to be the same type of production from him. So something to keep in mind. I'm definitely not sold on McConkey as like a slam dunk buy low candidate for next year.
Otherwise, Jalen Waddle, very disappointing, 0.7 PPR points. He did suffer a rib injury that unfortunately left him sidelined for a good chunk of that game. And Dolphins honestly just probably decided not to really rush him back into things. Moving on to tight end. Wasn't the easiest tight end 1 performance, but it was the tight end 1 performance we were expecting nevertheless. Trey McBride with 23.6 PPR points against the lowly Bengals. But man, through 3 quarters of football, Jacoby Brissett had like 70 or 80 total passing yards. And then he did Jacoby Brissett things and turned on the 4th quarter when the game was already well out of hand. But ultimately, Trey McBride caught 10 of 13 targets for 76 yards in a score. If Kyle Pitts just doesn't go off, if he has like 5 or 6 points, McBride will have over 100 more PPR points than any other tight end this season. Incredible season. Again, tight end 1 in the fantasy playoffs for now. We'll see what happens with Pitts. I said, LaMarca, a lot of this has been in garbage time. I think that's fair. I mean, since Jacoby's been under center, dude, I think I saw the stat. They're 0-8 with like a minus 125 point differential. I don't think Trey McBride is anything other than an absolute baller, man. But if we're going to see the situation kind of like last year, really, man, with Bowers, where we have a new quarterback, we have a new offensive coordinator, I'm probably not going to be signing up to draft McBride as like a top 15 pick when we can wait another round or 2 and get guys like Brock Bowers.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, fading the number 1 tight end, the most expensive tight end, generally seems to be a pretty good strategy. I mean, they always seem to go a little bit ahead of where they should. And there's always late guys that pop, right? I mean, we've kind of seen that over the past few years. Tyler Warren was great to start the year. We've had guys come on down the stretch like Colston Loveland, and who could forget Tucker Kraft before he got hurt. Jawan Johnson was great all year. So I love Trey McBride. I do agree that this production feels a little bit fluky. The Cardinals basically, since Jacoby Brissett has taken over a quarterback, are number 1 in drop back over expectation. Brissett has thrown the ball 40 plus times in basically every start. You would hope that they don't have to play in those kind of trailing game scripts as much next year, but who knows? We'll see what happens. The one thing I will say is that Jacoby Brissett should be the Cardinals starting quarterback, that all that sort of noise has very, very much quieted down over the past few weeks.
And that was always the thing, man. Like I get people being excited in fantasy, had very good reason to, but I mean, it's not like the on-field results were that great. And better than Kyler, sure, but Kyler, unfortunately, especially for him, was putting forward a very low bar, at least in the year 2025. So Jacoby is under contract for another year, but you would have to think they're going to be adding at a minimum Malik Willis, not a maximum, man. Maybe trading up in the draft and trying to get their guy. Tight end 2 on the week, not Raiders tight end Brock Bowers, Raiders tight end Michael Mayer, proving once again what he really could do with a full-time role of his own. Caught 9 of 10 targets for 89 scoreless yards. I don't know. Don't know if the Raiders are going to let him leave. Obviously good to have a lot of good players in your football team. Michael Mayer is one of them. They definitely won't be sending him to Kansas City, but can you imagine if they did, LaMarca? Michael Mayer with Patrick Mahomes? Come on, man. Why not?
Why can't we just get both of these guys on the field and make them both featured parts of their offense? I mean, we've kind of seen the Rams with the no Devontae offense the last few weeks using 3 tight ends. The Raiders' 2 best pass catchers, I think, pretty clearly are Bowers and Mayer. With all due respect to Trey Tucker out there,
yeah.
But I would love to see an offense that is sort of built around 2 tight ends and Ashton Genty next year. I think that would be really interesting to watch.
And they experimented it, with a little bit there, but just down the stretch, you were still seeing games like a 20% snap rate. So Mayer got hurt. Bowers was hurt a little bit. But yeah, man, I'm with you. And obviously, with Tom Brady maybe pulling some strings up there in ownership, he would be certainly someone probably more open to that than most. Tight end 3, Dolphins tight end Darren Waller. Oh, no, it was actually Greg Dulcich, 16.1 PPR points against the Buccaneers. Shout out to everyone that has continued to be a Dulcich truther all these years. Tight end 4, Titans tight end Chiggy Okonkwo, 14.5 PPR points, had a sweet 43-yard touchdown with a lot of yak. Again, we got other guys in that offense being involved. Chig didn't do a ton this year. Still does prove from time to time to be a very talented
I still
player,
believe in you, Chig.
With the football in his hands, 100% with you, man. Let's get a real offensive mind and some weapons in Tennessee and give him a full-time role and see what happens. Tight end 5 on the week, Patriots tight end Hunter Henry. LaMarca, first time in his career after I chastised him all offseason, he has cleared the 700 receiving yard mark. So credit there. I continue to be proven as a nothing fraud. He was just a tight end 14 this season. So let's not get too carried away, people. But still, good stuff from Hunter Henry again in that beatdown over the Jets. And finally, Jawan Jesus, Saints tight end 1 with 13.5 against the Titans. Up to tight end 12 on the season now. Great stuff from Jawan Johnson. And then Travis Kelce, 8.6 points in his last game at Arrowhead. Jake Ferguson, 7.6. Dalton Schultz, just 4.9. So good stuff from the tight end group. But LaMarca, let's get to the Xfinity best game of the week, brought to you by Xfinity. Imagine all your football all in one place. Easy Xfinity. Imagine that. Let's keep on talking about those Saints because they took down the Titans 34-26. Saints covered as 1.5 point faves. The over cash at 39. Tyler Shuck, someone who we mentioned briefly, but honestly at this point, LaMarca might be the offensive rookie of the year. We got the tweet from Chris Olave post-game saying just that. 4-game win streak. Yes, it was against the Bucks, Panthers, Jets, and Titans, but hey, still a situation where the Saints hadn't won 4 regular season games in the same season in a row since having Drew Brees in 2020. So great stuff from Shuck. I was one of those people, LaMarca, that I thought I saw enough from Spencer Rattler for him to keep getting chances, but man, they had Tyler Shuck there. Kudos to Kellen Moore and company for getting him going.
Yeah, and shout out to my buddy who sent me a text today. He's got a 200-1 bomb on Shuck to win Offensive Rookie of the Year from earlier this season. So hoping that hits for him. But yeah, he can play, and you can see the talent. There's a reason that this guy was a 5-star prospect, but going into college back in 1975 or whenever it was. It took him a long time to get there, but now that he's here, I think he has pretty firmly cemented his status as the Saints quarterback of the future. He should not have to, earn the job next year. I think it should be his pretty much from day one moving forward.
And again, the performances haven't seemed fluky, and he's not even doing it, man, with a bunch of help. Like I saw, a tweet from Nick Underhill. I'll pull it up right now because we obviously realize, Rashid Shaheed got traded and all that. But like, unless you really are plugged into the Saints, you probably don't realize just how detrimental it's been. And yeah, here we go from Nick. Today, the Saints did not have their wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, RB 1, 2, and 3. Their right guard, their center, their tight end 2, their tight end 3 got hurt in the game, but they did have Tyler Shuck. So again, great stuff from the rookie. And I'm with Matt. He should be at at this point. I would think the definitive Week 1 starter in 2026 for the Saints. I
And
mentioned
shout
Audric
out
Estime.
Olave too, man. Like, I think he
Oh yeah.
is, he probably has not gotten enough credit for being one of the best receivers in football. I mean, he's had to deal with poor quarterback play for a lot of his career. And, I don't think anybody was super excited at the idea of him catching passes from Rattler and Shuck this year.
Mhm.
And he has just been super reliable all year long, no matter who has been under center. And he's another Ohio State guy just getting the job done at receiver. Who could have seen it coming?
He is one of those guys, though, man, where I thought he might be just a better overqualified wide receiver, too. Kind of like a Devontae Smith. Like, okay, he can be a wide receiver one on, a couple handfuls worth of teams. But maybe if you really want to have one of the better passing attacks, he shouldn't be yours. But, man, after this year, like, why not, man? Certainly everything he can do. Let's go ahead and get some other help there. Again, Devon Bailey was doing some good things. So get a better wide receiver, too. But, man, Chris Olave, wide receiver one, certainly what he has been. Ever since Tyler Shuck came under center since Week 9, the wide receiver 5 in fantasy, nearly 19 fantasy points per game. Great stuff from Olave. Mentioned the great stuff from Juwan Jesus. Kevin Austin also got a touchdown, but do have to go through that Taysom Hill predicament. So on our start sit stream this morning, guys, we did go over some of Nick Underhill's comments, basically about the Taysom Hill performance really being probably more due to the last game in the Superdome, and accordingly, again, dropped him down a bit more of that tight end 13, tight end 14 range, which was still completely wrong because this guy had 0 yards out there. Should have been the tight end 60 on the week if we were trying to be 100% accurate. So it sucks, but I will just say, I wonder if we did get banged up in the game. I didn't completely have like full eyes on that. Was mostly kind of going through red zone today, but he only played 7 total snaps. He had 35 last week. Again, wasn't expecting him necessarily hit 35, but the previous 5 games, even before the week 16 breakout, he averaged 20 snaps in those games. So even a shell of that. And just personally, man, with all the injuries at tight end, at running back, at wide receiver, I thought at least the receiving role was still going to be there, but man, just 3 total routes run, his lowest since week 9. So, good for Taysom Hill, LaMarca. I am very much looking forward to a world we did not have to worry about this in fantasy football.
It feels like they determine how many snaps he's going to play by just picking a number out of one of those bingo rollers. Like, 7 for this week for Taysom Hill, and now for the number of touches, 0, 7, 0. It's like, there's no rhyme or reason to it. We've seen weeks where you expect nothing from him and he scores 3 touchdowns. And then there are weeks when you expect plenty from him and he completely busts. That's just the Taysom Hill experience.
Taysom Hill's like stat lines, I feel like in his usage, like you're saying, I think they're figured out. Remember that South Park episode where they would cut the head off the chicken and they just kind of throw it onto the big board, all the different squares. They start playing the kazoo. I feel like that has been the Taysom Hill experience for like the last 8 years, and it has driven me nuts. Obviously a fantastic player and everything. And it is very cool, all the, jack of all trades stuff he does. But yeah, very, very frustrating here in Fantasyland. We want to talk about those Titans though, because again, it takes 2 to put together a great game, which this honestly was. And Cam Ward, man, I know you mentioned it too, and I'm with you. I really do believe that this dude, with a just competent, maybe even a good, God forbid, we have a good offensive environment in Tennessee, could be something special. So 251 yards and a pair of scores through the day. Had a sweet diving throw to Tajay Spears on a 4th down that unfortunately his knee was down just before it happened. So didn't quite get it done, but he has the ability to make the hard stuff happen, LaMarca, that you just don't see from other quarterbacks. The ability to throw with, again, velocity at different arm angles. He is quite mobile in the pocket. He always is looking to throw. And honestly, like he's fine with the easy stuff as well. It's just nothing's easy in Tennessee in the first place. Like he's making Chamari DK and Alec Manor actually into things here. So 4 straight games with multiple touchdown passes for Cam Ward. He had 0 during the first 13 weeks of the season. I'm excited about 2026, man.
Absolutely. And, we'll I'm sure there will be tons of NFL draft coverage at Fantasy Life moving forward. But like, if they don't draft a receiver in, let's just say the first 2 rounds, but really they should use one in the first round, maybe in the second round too. Like they just need to get this guy some help, man. Because I think if you can build around him, he can produce for you. We've seen the Panthers. It hasn't necessarily worked out, but they've tried at least to do that with Bryce Young, and I hope that the Titans at least give Cam Ward the same opportunity.
We'll see how high he ends up going, man. But adding another Buckeye receiver in Carnell Tate really could be fun for that offense as a whole. Mentioned DK, just 55 receiving yards, but tacked on some more return yardage. And he now actually owns the all-time rookie record with 2,317 all-purpose yards. It's actually the most in a season since 2020, ahead of 2024 Saquon, 2021 Jonathan Taylor, and 2020 Derrick Henry. Just four of the single best players in all football. And a good reminder that kickoffs really are back in a major way this year. And the Titans gave up a lot of touchdowns, which made this happen. But whatever, DK's done some good things. Want to give him his flowers anyway. Alec A. Manor scored a touchdown. Have you noticed this, LaMarca, where he is now like the new Cortland Sutton, where we have to type up players all week? And Cortland Sutton, guys, every time you type out Cortland and you hit space, it autocorrects and it removes the U. With Alec A. Manor, when you type out Alec and then you hit space, it changes it to Epic. I do not think he has done enough to get that nickname yet, but there might be something there, LaMarca.
Yeah, it's definitely better than Cortland, just them taking the U out, right? I mean, like that's not a cool nickname, but Epic AO Manor, that's pretty freaking cool. So if we can hope, let's hope for the best for Epic.
Let's hope for the best for Epic, Cam Ward, Titans, and everyone else. But again, we appreciate their contributions to making this a fun Sunday of action. So again, this was our Xfinity Best Game of the Week, brought to you by Xfinity. Imagine all your football all in one place. Easy. Xfinity, imagine that. LaMarca, appreciate you, man. Again, everyone can check out your work over on fantasylife.com. I'm sure we'll get together again throughout this offseason as well. As far as this week, guys, you can look forward to myself and Kendall Valenzuela going over some of the biggest lessons we learned here on Monday's edition of the Fantasy Life Show. And then Matthew Friedman will be in the house breaking down some fun stuff on Tuesday as well. So hope you guys enjoyed Christmas, holidays, whatever you're celebrating. We got some New Year's goodness to look forward to as well. So take it all in, have a couple extra calories, or burn that shit off in January and beyond. So for producer Matt, for producer Mick, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.